Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic console compiler. Today we will look at command line parameter handling to applications. Today we're going to have a look at command line parameters. So one of the first questions you may ask is why use command line parameters? We have a console application on screen at the moment. And this console application may be run from some scheduled task, and the scheduled task may wish to pass information to our application by the use of a command line parameter string. If we have a look at the IDE at the top on the menu, we'll see under the Run menu there's a Set Command Line. This allows you to set command line parameters. So in here we have a string of text. I'll go through these parameters in a moment, but this mechanism allows you in the IDE to pass a string of text as a command line parameter. So let's go and have a look at the code to see how we can pick up this information. First of all, we will create a local variable to accept our command line parameters. And we'll call that command. And it'll be an ordinary string. You can pick up the value that comes in on the command line quite easily by using one of the inbuilt commands of PowerBasic, and that is command $. So we'll just use our logging function to send the variable that contains this command string out to the log so we can see it. So if we try running our application now, we will see there is our command line coming in, having been populated from command $. Now, one limitation of this part of the IDE is there's a limit to how long this string can be. You'll see at the end of the string there's a missing closing quote. So if we exit from here and we go back in and we add the closing quote to the end, there we've added it. If we hit OK, if we go back in again and have a look, you'll see that on the end, the extra character we put in is not appearing. So this is obviously the limit to the number of characters you can have in this field that's supported by the IDE. However, it's enough for us to prove what we can actually see on the command line. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a new library to our application. And this is PB command line. If we have a look at that library, we'll see it has only a single function. And this is the function we're going to use to extract from that entire command line string each individual parameter. So let's go back to the code and see just how we're going to do that. So this is the format of our command line parameters. There are effectively 4 parameters here. 1 for the time slot ref, 1 for the building, 1 for the hour, and 1 for the time slot. The way we've structured these is each of these named parameters is preceded by a slash and terminated with the hash sign. And then in quotes after that is the parameter value. So we will create 4 local variables so we can populate them from this string. And here we have 4 string variables for each of these parameters. We can populate, for example, the time slot ref by calling that function in our library just the once. And here is the call to this new function in our library. The output from the function is the value we're going to slot into our variable, time slot ref. It takes 2 parameters. The first parameter is the text, which is the name of our parameter, including the prefix and the suffix. And the second parameter is the command line string. Having populated this variable, we can then output it using our logging function. So if we run the application now, we will see it's bringing out the value 1. Now at the moment, the value 1 appears for each of the 4 parameters. So to ensure we're getting the right one, let's change those parameter values in our IDE. So we have the values 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if we run the application once more, we will see for the time slot ref, we're getting the value 1. So we know that it is explicitly coming from this command line parameter. So we can repeat this process for the other 3 parameters, the building, the hour, and the time slot. And we will push those out to our log so we can make sure that the values have correctly arrived. And if we run our application once more, we will see there are the 4 values, 1, 2, 3, and 4, for each of the respective variables. So what we've achieved so far is we have passed a command line to our application, and we have pulled the values out quite happily. So in using this library, if the order of the parameters coming in changes, we don't have to change our source code. The parameters are handled by name, and it's also case independent. So if the parameters you're referring to in your code are uppercase or lowercase, and the casing in the application calling your application is different, then it won't matter at all. So this handles one scenario, where your application is being passed parameters by some other third-party facility. You may also, when you create your applications, have one console application call another, and in calling this other application, you may wish to pass parameters. You can do this, as we've shown in other videos, by creating a configuration file. However, you can still use the command line to pass a long string of parameters, which is what we'll look at next. So in order to demonstrate this, we're going to create another console application. We're going to call this one Control App. We will take in the libraries we had before, the Common Display library, and our new command line library. And we're going to use this application to make a call to our other application. So in here we're going to format a string, which are our command line parameters. So first of all, we will create a local variable into which we'll put all our command line parameters. So we know first of all, we're going to be calling our executable. That will be cc command line parameters. And we're going to pass it a number of parameters. I'm going to break this string up into a number of lines to make it easier to read. So our first parameter is the time slot reference. And we're going to have a double quote, and this time our parameter passing will be the word Monday, and then finishing off with a double quote and then a space. And we'll do the same for each of the remaining 3 parameters. So there is our full parameter string. Now we want to launch our command line parameters executable. And to do that, we're going to use a new function. And this is an execute command function. So let's go and create this new function. I've been using this function for quite a long time. It takes 2 parameters. The second parameter is optional. The first one is the command line string. This is what we have just assembled. The second parameter is whether you want a console visible to the user or not. There may be times when you wish to launch this other application, but not make it visible to the user. So if we pass a 0 or the constant create no window, then it will not create a console window. If you pass anything else, it will use a new console, which means it will be visible to the user. And then we're calling a Windows API function called createProcess. And the timeout I've got set for this one is to wait forever for the application to finish. You may wish to launch applications, but not wait for them to finish. It depends entirely on what your application is wanting to do. But in today's case, we want to wait for our application to complete. So since we're going to be calling the command line parameters executable, there's a couple of changes in there we want to make. At the moment, at the end, it's got a wait command. Now this would mean we'll wait for the user to press a button on the keyboard. Now we don't need that anymore in our application, and we're going to comment out all the handling of the logs. And we won't need the common display anymore. and we'll take out the specific console commands. So we will replace these calls to the log with a simple stdout, which will send out to the active console. I'm using the prefix command to save a little bit of typing. And rather than waiting for the user to press a button, we will wait for 7 seconds before exiting. So if we try running this application on its own, we missed one. So if we try running the application on its own, it should display, bring up the parameters, it should wait 7 seconds, and then it should self-terminate, which is ideal. So if we go to now our control app, which is going to be calling that parameters application. So we're going to be passing parameters for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we will execute that command and we will wait for something coming back. So this second call can demonstrate quite happily that changing the order of the name parameters does not matter. And also changing the casing of the name of the parameter also does not matter. Building will still be pulled out of the command string and it will still give us the value of Tuesday. However, you may find a requirement where the parameters you're using need to be prefixed with something other than a slash character. So to show how this would work, we're putting a pipe delimiter in here as the prefix for the building parameter. If we run this now, let's see what it shows as. So the first one appears as expected, with building with the value of Tuesday. The second one runs, and we've now got building with the uppercase D as the last parameter, and it's still coming out correctly. However, the third one with the pipe delimiter is coming up blank. This is because we're not handling it in the underlying application. So let's look at the parameters one. So the population of this variable is coming back as blank. We can, of course, test for that. So we're testing the value of the building variable. If it is currently blank, then we're going to use an alternate delimiter. And we're going to call our function once more, but this time with the pipe character as the prefix of the parameter name. So if we recompile our application once more, which will allow us to run control app a final time. And it will run through the 3 iterations, building coming back with the value of Tuesday. And when the second iteration runs with the building parameter at the end of the list, it's still coming back and showing as Tuesday. And the final one, having building with a pipe delimiter, is now showing as Tuesday. So you don't need a slash as the prefix of the name of our parameter. So in summary, what we've done today, we've provided a new library containing a single function. This single function allows you to pass named parameters between applications, either from some third-party application or perhaps a task scheduler into your application or between 2 of your own applications. And you're not limited by the length of the string. As you can see, we've now got a longer string than we had originally from the PowerBasic IDE. Hopefully, this code and this approach will give you benefits within your own applications, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching today's video. Please feel free to click on the link in the description below to discover more videos.